Hello, everyone. I am Mimi Lichtenstein, owner of Trouvé Travel, and today on Adventures in Luxury Travel, I am here with Hicham Alawi, one of my favorite experts on Morocco. He actually is Moroccan, but he also studied in the United States, so it's great because he knows all the details about Morocco, but he gets the American sensibilities. So welcome to the show, Hicham. Would you tell us a little bit about starting Experience Morocco? What prompted you to do that?
Hi, Mimi. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here today and tell all your listeners about our beautiful country. To answer your question, Experience Morocco was a birth of very unique circumstances because my business partner and I met in business school in the US and had originally no intention of starting a business, let alone starting a business in travel. But our friends in school at the time asked us to put together a journey for them to see Morocco through our eyes. And we were thrust into this position of organizing this trip and then found out that there was a lot into the travel industry and wanted to start this company to show the very best of our country to our friends initially, and then it blossomed into something very different. And today we're happy to call ourselves your friendly neighborhood experts when it comes to all things Morocco.
Well, I would agree with that. So I know, I've been to Morocco a few times. I love Morocco for many, many reasons. I love it for family travel in particular because there's so many adventures to go on, ways to be active, cool culture, great food, and it feels just so very different than anywhere in the United States. So I think it's a great sort of first place to go to that has a really drastically different culture than what we're used to. So I'm excited to talk about it with you today. And do you want to start with, I think you maybe have, let's see, I'm going to have your screen, there we go, get added. And you could give us kind of a little bit of an overview of the country to start.
Yes, Morocco is very much a place of many contrasts, and it all starts with the geography of the country. So I think it's worth looking at a map and sort of getting anchored into the places that people want to see most as part of their time in Morocco. So we're looking at a map of Morocco here. There's a bunch of letters to mark out different either cities or sites of interest, and we'll just sort of dig right into the key highlights. And if you have any questions or comments along the way, happy to pause and answer them. So for most people, the journey into Morocco starts and ends with the letter A, which is Casablanca. There's a lot of background about Casablanca, which is people often fantasize about the city because of the connection to the movie, and it's just a name that resonates so much in people's minds that we often have guests who request 4 or 5 nights in Casablanca. And while it pains me to say this because it is my city where I grew up and was raised, the truth is there's honestly not a whole lot to do and see in Casablanca. So for most people, it's a one-night stay at the beginning or at the end of the trip. However, it is still going to be your point of arrival and departure, simply because that's the city with the most air connections, particularly for people coming from Europe or from the United States. So that's the letter A. Then we move to the capital city of Morocco, which is Rabat. So that's B, that's an hour to the north of Casablanca. And Rabat is either a place we stop in just for a lunch, as sort of a grounding into Morocco on your first day, or an overnight stop, depending on how many days we have in the country. But let me ask you, Mimi, when you were in Morocco, did you spend some time in Rabat?
Sadly, no.
Yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, no, it's a worthwhile city to visit. It really is. Obviously, it's the capital. So it's where His Majesty the King resides, and there's quite a bit of history in Rabat to uncover. Most people, though, skip Rabat on their way to Fez, which is, I'm guessing, what you did. Is that right?
I didn't go in this direction, actually. So I've not been to Casablanca either. I have been from Tangier down through Fez, Chefchaouen, Marrakech, Atlas Mountains, the desert, and all those places.
So I think from C onwards, we're going to talk about the places that you visited, but it sounds like A and B were not on your itinerary. So you mentioned Tangier. That could be a fair question. Why isn't Tangier one of the points of interest here? While it is certainly possible to do what you did, which is start in Tangier and then make your way down south, unless you're coming in from the south of Spain, we find that it's a detour that just isn't compatible with the short duration of time that most people have when they're visiting Morocco. Most of our guests have 6 to 8 nights, and in that kind of a framework, when you're flying into Casablanca and out of Casablanca, unfortunately, we just don't have enough time to include Tangier. We do, however, include Chefchaouen. But sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Hicham, actually, all 3 times I was coming from Spain. So that is why I started in Tangier. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, if you're doing a combination of Spain and Morocco, which a fair number of people do, want to do as part of their travels, then it makes perfect sense to start there. And we can tell your listeners as well that in that case, you're looking at a 1 to 2 hour boat ride from the south of Spain into Morocco. And I'm assuming that's what you guys did, correct?
Yes, we did on 2 occasions, and we flew in from Madrid on another occasion.
Gotcha. Okay. So from Tangier, this is now joining your itinerary. You have the beautiful blue village of Chefchaouen. That's the letter C on this map. And Chefchaouen, we'll get into this a bit later, but is really a very picturesque and beautiful site in the north of Morocco that's well worth including when we have the time. And then from there, you get into the first sort of major pillar of Moroccan destinations, which is the imperial city of Fez. So that's the letter D on the map. And just to sort of break things down here for people listening in, if you're going to pick 3 places to visit in Morocco, you're going to typically pick Fez, the Sahara Desert, and Marrakech. And they're going to form, roughly speaking, a triangle, which you can see here on the map between the letter D, the letter E, which is the deserts all the way to the south, and then the letter H, which is Marrakech. So if you sort of combine those 3, you form a triangle that represents the places in Morocco that most people want to experience when they come and see our country. And so Fez is typically a 2 to 3 night stop, and we'll get into sort of what you do in Fez a bit later. Then you get into the deserts. As you can tell on the map, that's quite a lengthy drive. It's a beautiful drive, but it is a lengthy one. You're looking at 8 to 9 hours of driving time to get to the desert. And then from the desert to Marrakech, that's a total of about 12 hours of driving, so it's too long to do in one day. And therefore, we break it up into 2 nights. One where you're stopping either in the letter F or the letter G. That's either the Dades Gorges or Ouarzazate. And then finally, you get into Marrakech, where you typically spend 3 to 4 nights. As part of your time in Marrakech, you can explore the Atlas Mountains. That's the letter J. That's just a 1-hour drive away from Marrakech. So again, that can be either a day trip or an overnight trip. And then last but not least, we have a beautiful seaside city called Essaouira. That's a 2.5-hour drive from Marrakech, so that you can see that's the letter I on the map. And that, again, is worth including if we're looking at a 10, 12-night itinerary, where we can go ahead and include that stop as well. So that's a very much a whirlwind tour through the key highlights of Morocco, but I think it's helpful to get grounded in some of the logistics of travel before we enter each of these places and what there is to do.
And you mentioned something that I was going to bring up later, but I'll just throw it in now, and that is a helpful tip. When you look at distances in Morocco, they do not equate to times. So that is a mistake that before I was in this industry, I made a couple of times with children. And you never want to think that you're going on a 60-mile drive and it's going to take 60 minutes, and it actually takes you like 5 hours. And so keep that in mind when you're looking at the distances between places, particularly with kids, that you want to be more cautious about how much time you're spending in the car.
Absolutely, yeah, that's absolutely right. And we typically advise on the exact driving time in each day, and we make sure to communicate with all of our guests to make sure that they understand that. And if they think there's not going to be a fit, particularly for young children who can get impatient in long car rides, then we can rework the itinerary in other ways to avoid some of those long drives.
Great. Okay, terrific. Well, let's dive into some of the favorite hotels.
Perfect. Yeah, Moroccan accommodations. I think you wanted to define some of the keywords. We're going to start with
You're right.
Do you want to do that now?
Yes, I forgot that part. So this is like Morocco 101. I asked Hicham if he could go into what is a riad, a Medina, a kasbah, and a souk. But if there's any other ones you want to throw in there too, feel free.
Well, riad, I'm going to illustrate with a picture because, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So let's get into some of the accommodations. And the very first accommodation I want to call out is Palais Amani, which is a great example of a riad. So riad, that's spelled R-I-A-D. And what that refers to is a particular design, an architectural design that is very emblematic of how Moroccan homes used to be structured back in the day. And they are typically defined by a U-shaped architecture with an open rooftop in that central part of the house, which you can see here. This is a picture taken from the rooftop of this particular riad called Palais Amani. And then in the center of a riad, you typically have a fountain. That's, again, a very emblematic traditional element of architecture in these riads. So again, back in the day, these used to be family homes, and nowadays they've been reconverted into boutique hotels. Typically have anywhere between 8 to 20 rooms for the larger ones. And what's cool about this relative to a sort of more standard modern hotel is that you're experiencing a very much a traditional kind of Moroccan home with some of the unique touches that you can't get in a standard hotel. So that's the first keyword you wanted us to define, which is riad.
Perfect. I like the visuals. And then Medina, how does a Medina differ from a kasbah?
All right, so Medina is an Arabic word for city. More specifically, it's old city. So think about the ancient alleyways in the old cities of Morocco. This is particularly important to understand for Fez and Marrakech. Fez is the Fez Medina, the traditional Fez Medina. So again, the old city is actually a car-free zone. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and so there are no cars inside. You get around either by on foot or on mules or motorcycles, but cars aren't allowed. And so Medina, to answer your question, is an old city, and the typical two most important Medinas in Morocco are going to be Fez and Marrakech. So that's Medina. Kasbah, to answer your other question, is an ancient fortress. And the best example of that is something we'll get to a bit later, which is Kasbah Ait Ben Haddou, which is a unique site in the south of Morocco, which I know you've been to as well.
Yeah. Okay. And then what about a souk?
Souk is a bazaar, so an ancient sort of anything goes, free flowing exchange of merchandise with everything from your textiles to leatherwork to arts and crafts like traditional pottery and things of that nature. And again, the biggest souks in Morocco are found in Fez and Marrakech, but that's what a souk is.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Clears everything up.
All right, so let's keep going with some of the unique accommodations you have in Morocco. This is, again, designed to be a whirlwind tour, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on any one, but I want to sort of bring Morocco to life with some of its most unique properties. This is just to illustrate an example of a suite in a riad. Moving right along, one of the main highlights for people when they come to Morocco is a stay in a luxury Moroccan camp in the middle of the desert. As you can tell, we don't take any shortcuts on the amenities, so we want our guests to be comfortable, but the idea is that you are in a remote camp surrounded by the dunes of the Sahara Desert. Do you want to jump in here? Because I know you've had this experience yourself. Anything you want to add on that?
Sure. I mean, I would say absolutely you want to include that on an itinerary, whether you're with kids or just with adults. There's so many cool, adventurous things that you can do out there. And I'll just show a couple of pictures of, this is my kiddos going off into the desert. I think that actually you can see the moon out. It was a spectacular day. And the nighttime is just as spectacular, right? With gorgeous stars and all of that.
Yeah.
And you get to see, fun camels and gorgeous sunsets. These are all pictures from our last trip there. And I think the other thing that I love about staying out there is, do I have a photo of it? I might have it on video, is the nighttime. Oh yeah, there it is. So this is an example of, us all hanging out around a bonfire at nighttime under the gorgeous stars. Like, it was absolutely, a magical night. And this actually, here's a little video of my kiddos who are teenagers heading out on ATVs through the desert. And they absolutely loved that. So I think that a desert is an absolute must part of any itinerary in Morocco, personally.
Fully agree. The only condition is, the time to get there, and we can talk about, there's a VIP option, which is you get there and back with a helicopter, and then you're not dealing with any long drives. But for most people, it's a long drive, but it's definitely something that's worth doing. And yeah, we try to encourage to include it anytime we can. So that's the Sahara Desert. Moving right along, there's a very unique property that is worth sort of a mention in its own category called Dar Ahlam. Dar in Arabic means house. Ahlam is dream, so essentially it translates to the house of dreams. This property is located on the way from the desert into Marrakech, near the city of Ouarzazate. And what's particular about Dar Ahlam is really their gastronomy. Their cuisine is out of this world, and they have a very unique dining concept where you never eat twice in the same location while you're on property. And so that can be either locations, for example, on the rooftop of the main building, which is structured like an ancient Kasbah, somewhere in the gardens, or it can also be a number of excursions that they organize within a 2-hour drive of the property, where they set up this really refined cuisine with unbelievable landscapes surrounding you. And so Dar Ahlam is very much a foodie paradise, and something I wanted to call out as a bit of a unique property.
Yes, and Hicham, it's definitely on my bucket list for my next trip back. It looks spectacular.
It really is. It really is spectacular. Moving into Marrakech, Marrakech is chock full of amazing riads. One of our favorites is called La Villa des Orangers. This is a Relais Chateau property. A lot of these larger riads are the combinations of multiple different riads, meaning multiple small buildings that have been combined. And that's how you end up with having enough space to build a pool, which is certainly not something you could do in a traditional small riad. But this property really is unique. This is a small glimpse of some of the suites in this property. And Marrakech is really the place where you're most spoiled for choice. So going away from Villa des Orangers, there's another Grand Dame of Marrakech, as it's often referred to, called La Mamounia. This property has hosted the likes of Winston Churchill all the way through to Lady Gaga, so really quite a wide gamut of personalities. But it is the most iconic Marrakech property because of its storied history, and has a level of service to go with their brand. And so that's certainly another option to look at in Marrakech, La Mamounia. This is an example of one of their suites looking out into the main, one of the main monuments of Marrakech, which is called the Koutoubia Mosque, that you can see illustrated here. The other property that is not only among the best properties in Morocco, but if I may say so, one of the best properties in the entire world, called the Royal Monsour. This property is owned by His Majesty the King himself, and it takes the level of service and attention to detail all the way up to 13 out of 10. It's just another level of service, of exquisiteness in the refinement of the building materials, the way in which it was designed. What you're looking at here is the rooftop of a riad. So in this property, we don't have rooms. Effectively, every client has their own riad, so their own 3-story building. At the topmost floor, you have a rooftop area with a small pool. On the second floor, you have 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms, depending on how large a riad it is that you're booking. And on the ground floor, you have this very large seating area and dining area as well. And it just again, this experience is one of a kind and takes things to a whole new level in terms of luxury.
And Hicham, I will add that one of my clients' favorite hotels in the entire world is the Royal Monsour. And when they talk about it, their faces light up. I mean, they just think and believe it is the most magical place. And, people are around, but you don't even see like the people who work there. They just appear with whatever you're thinking that you might want in the next moment. Somehow they read your mind or something. But they cannot say enough great things about it.
Yeah, and I'm not going to add anything more to what you just said, but we will move along. I just wanted to give just another example of a unique property in Marrakech. This is one of the more recent openings in the city. It opened about 2 years ago. This property called Palais Ronsard. What's special about it is they bring sort of an Italian villa concept to the outskirts of Marrakech. And there's one particular touch that I really love. You can see this fresco drawn on the wall. These are all hand drawn by an artist who trained at the Louvre, and every room has its own unique mural. So a nice touch and something a bit different from the more traditional Moroccan decor. So just the point here is that regardless of what kind of hotel you're looking for, there will be an offering for you in Marrakech. It's a place that has a very wide range of accommodations to cater to any traveler. Another property that's very much worth a highlight is Kasbah Tamadot. This is Sir Richard Branson's retreat in the Atlas Mountains, about an hour and 15 minutes outside of Marrakech. I mentioned earlier that you can go hiking into the mountains, but if you are able to spend the night or two, this is very much a place worth your stay. The pool that you can see here is actually heated, which in the winter months gives quite a unique sensation of doing laps in a heated pool while surrounded by the chill air of the Atlas Mountains. The property features gorgeous views over the mountains, and it also offers a quirky selection of colors in terms of how the rooms are appointed and decorated. And then the nec plus ultra in this hotel is these tents, Berber tents, as they are called, that have private patios looking out rather onto the valley, and that's an example of one of the tents on the inside.
I will say before we transition on,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, first of all, anything Richard Branson does, like I love, so that's also on my list. I'm sure it is absolutely spectacular. I also love, I think the name means soft breeze, if I'm not mistaken, which just feels like you're in the desert, but you have this soft breeze and you're staying in this lovely, luxurious place. So I think everything about that sounds like a perfect destination. Regarding real quick, Palais Ronsard, which I don't say it with a beautiful French Moroccan accent like you do, but if I'm not mistaken, that's a Relais and Chateau property, and it's not right in the central Marrakech, right? It's a little bit more outside of Marrakech. Okay, so
yeah, it's in the palm groves of Marrakech. Yeah, and just here we go. So that's about a 30-minute drive from the center of Marrakech.
Yeah, so kind of two very different experiences when you go to places like Marrakech. You can stay right sort of, in the center, or in a place that has a little bit more spacious, a little bit more of a resort, expansive feel to it. So just depends upon what you're looking for.
Exactly. Absolutely right.
And then, so I think, are we going to talk about a few new hotels, which you and I talked about a little bit before we got on today? I mean, Nobu is on my list as one that I want to check out when I'm there, but I don't think it opens till 2022. And you were mentioning that several of the ones that were on deck to be built are a little uncertain at the moment, just given everything going on in the world. Maybe tell us a little bit about the one that you told me about that is has a super famous owner.
Yes, and he's come quite a few times to Marrakech to check on the progress of his new property. So that's a CR7, which is going to be Cristiano Ronaldo's hotel opening in Marrakech, just next door to the Four Seasons, which is currently already in operation in Marrakech for several years now, and that is well on its way in terms of the construction, and we expect it to open in 2022. So that'll add a little dose of celebrity ownership to the Marrakech hotel scene.
Well, if Hicham, you can tell me when Cristiano's going to be there, then I will absolutely bring my son with me and we'll show up.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to some of the cool experiences you can have all over your country.
Yeah, and I please feel free to jump in because I know you've been to a lot of these places. And again, this is by no means exhaustive. It's just meant to give a quick overview, a highlight of some of the things we can do that some of these you're probably expecting, others you might not associate with Morocco. So that's another way we love to uncover our country's sort of secrets and share things with people that they don't necessarily expect about the destination. So Chefchaouen is a place that you spent some time in. And I guess I have a question for you, Mimi. What is the first and main activity that you did while you were in Chefchaouen?
Take pictures.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And so we figure out, as awesome as our cameras are now and as awesome as it is to take selfies, we've gone sort of one step further. We work with a local man from Chefchaouen who's become a friend of mine over the years and who's a professional photographer. And so we do these really fancy photo shoots where people end up with these really amazing shots of themselves exploring the blue walls and the blue village of Chefchaouen. So that's you end up with a collection of professionally edited photos that you can then post on Instagram and collect hearts to your heart's content. And so that's certainly a fun part of the country to explore. Moving into some of the arts and crafts, so we do partner with a fair number of cooperatives all around the country. There's an embroidery cooperative in the region of Chefchaouen where we can organize fun workshops where you can learn firsthand how to make the traditional Moroccan garments. The women pictured here are wearing what's known as jalabas. And so you can learn how these garments are made and try your hand at weaving. And I assure you it's not as easy as it may look, but that's a fun thing for us to try to put together for our guests. Moving into Volubilis, did you have a chance to explore these ruins when you were in Morocco?
I did. I'll share a picture. I have a lot of fun pictures from our time there because my kids were kind of like exploring everywhere, but this is one of the more normal ones where people weren't acting all crazy. The fact that there's these Roman ruins in the middle of Morocco, I had no idea. They are amazingly preserved. And if I'm not mistaken, only some of it has been excavated, that there's a whole like mountains more that haven't even been touched yet to go find all the ruins that are underneath it.
That's correct. Yeah, and it's really well preserved. It's they're amazing guides who can dig into the history of the Roman Empire that existed in Morocco, and it's one of the ways we like to attract people's attention to the rich tapestry of contrast that exists in our country. What's interesting about Volubilis is it's located just an hour away from Fez, and Fez is very much emblematic of the traditional Moorish architecture that you typically do associate with Morocco. So to see these two styles that have nothing to do with one another juxtaposed in such a close location gives you a sense of the history of the place and how far Morocco has gone in terms of the different civilizations that have been present in our country over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was beautiful.
So you can see the contrast, right? Let me go back one slide just so we can, again, absorb it. Roman columns and archways, and then boom, you're looking at mosaics and tiles and something very different here. So Al Qarawiyyin is we say in Morocco, it's the world's oldest continually operating university. And it's a marvel of architecture. And so you can tell in these pictures, it's very well preserved and very much worth a visit as part of a stay in Fez. Another fun thing we like to do in Fez is a tasting tour. So on top of the rich history of Fez, there's also a lot of the history of Moroccan gastronomy and Moroccan cuisine dates back to Fez. And so we'll do a tour where we'll stop in different places in the city and sample pastries. We'll sample different types of delicacies to educate your palates into the Moroccan diet and all of the things that make up our cuisine. We also have really fun immersive crafts workshop, whether it's brass etching, pottery, bookbinding. We like people to try their hands on some of the traditional Moroccan crafts. So that's another fun thing that we can organize in Fez as well as Marrakech.
And you
the tanneries. Go ahead.
Could I share one thing? So I actually have my daughter when we were there. I think we were in Fez when we did this. It's a little, but she got on like a potter's wheel. as someone was making their beautiful, oh no, we lost it. As someone was making their beautiful ceramics, right, with all the little pieces of it. And she had so much fun doing this. And again, this is a perfect activity, whether you're an adult or a younger child, just being able to get your hands dirty and talk with the artisans and learn about how they put these beautiful vases together was a really a big highlight for her. I'm going to find your
absolutely. That's
picture again. There you go. Okay. Oh, and I love these, although these are very, let's say, fragrant.
Yes, fragrant. That's a very good word. Fragrant. Yeah, the pro tip here is to hold up a little leaf of mint, which is available in abundant quantities in Morocco since we use it in our tea. And then once you have a bit of mint under your nose, it makes the whole experience far more palatable. So yeah, but it is something you should check out. The tanneries.
For the people who are listening when it's on the podcast and not watching, so tell us a little bit about what this is. So these are the tanneries where they take the leather, and what do they do with it?
Yeah, well, they dip it in vats of pigeon poop, which you wouldn't believe the economy of pigeon poop. It's a whole world. But yeah, so that's how Moroccan leather is dyed and prepared, and we have a lot of different colors to pick from. But essentially, yes, it's a sensory overload. When you're there, you don't want to spend a whole lot of time there, but you do want to check it out. It makes for some pretty pictures, and it's cool to understand how this process is still going and dates back to the Middle Ages. So yeah, that's the leather tanneries in Fez.
Yeah. Beautiful.
We mentioned earlier the Sahara deserts. For those who are fortunate enough to have the means to do a helicopter ride, that is definitely the way to go. You avoid a whole lot of driving, and it's a beautiful, beautiful path that you take where you traverse the Atlas Mountains. So if you're leaving from Marrakech, which is how people typically do it, you're flying above Marrakech and then you cross over the Atlas Mountains, and then you get into the Saharan plains and ultimately land in the middle of the sand dunes. So certainly it's sort of a bucket list type of experience that we can curate as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always like throwing in over-the-top ideas, and helicopters tend to fall in the category of over-the-top ideas. So
indeed.
I did not take a helicopter last time I was in Morocco, but I'll put it on my list for next time. So do some people just go do a helicopter tour over the sand dunes, and then other people actually use it as transportation to get there?
I would say very few people do a helicopter tour. It's mainly used as a transportation to get to the Sahara and back. Yeah.
Okay.
And so once you're in the Sahara, though, regardless of whether you've driven there or taken a helicopter, you get to experience some of the most beautiful, breathtaking natural landscapes you will ever see. And so in this picture, for podcast listeners, we're looking at a picture that has just the sand dunes with the sun rising above. And it's often a very contemplative, sort of tranquil moment for our guests who may want to scrapbook or journal, or try some yoga or even sandboarding. There's a lot of ways you can go about your sunrise in the desert, but it's definitely not something to be missed. So that's your morning in the Sahara. Right here, we're looking, again, I'm just sensitive now to the podcast listeners, that someone who's sandboarding in the nighttime, you're going to have a beautiful starlit sky. Is that something you had a chance to experience when you were there?
Oh, yes. Sandboarding also. I was not super successful, but my kiddos are all wakeboarders and snowboarders, so they were a little better at it than I was. But the sky, the quiet, it's just, again, it's magical. That's really the only way to describe it.
It really is. It really is. And along with the starlit sky, we often have that goes back to the video you shared earlier. The locals who are in the camp will sort of do song and dance and sing traditional songs of the Bedouins, and that's just a really fun way to connect with this element of Morocco's culture. And then again, the camel ride, which is something that's quite typical. So, are you going to jump in?
Yeah, well, I think the camel rides are, everybody loves a good camel ride. So absolutely want to do that. The other thing, which we didn't really think about before we went, but enjoyed doing, was stopping by to pick out our scarves before we went to the desert, just in case we needed them, because there was sand moving around. We didn't actually need them, but my teenagers still loved picking out the scarves and wearing them. And I'll say it makes for really good photos too. Here's a picture of my other daughter, and I think this was with the moon in the background right at dusk. And it, if you have children or teenagers who love Instagram, it's a highly Instagrammable location, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then here we're into the Qsar or Kasbah Bin Haddou, which is one of the most iconic sites in the country. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was the location or the backdrop for a lot of Hollywood scenes, particularly in the Gladiator movie, but also in others. And shockingly, there are still families living inside the Kasbah, so it's not just sort of a picture site, but very much still a living place that you can visit on your way from the desert into Marrakech. And then as you get into Marrakech, there are really a world of opportunities for different types of experiences depending on your interests. So one great one that's a very successful experience for us is the hot air balloon ride at sunrise. Gives you a really beautiful view over the area surrounding Marrakech. We have a particular sort of VIP option where you're served a gourmet breakfast on board, which is really over the top and just a great way to start your day while you're in Morocco. Another fun activity is a tajine cooking class. Now, is this something you did? Are you a tajine master now, me?
Well, we came home with the tagine. I love to cook, so whenever we go places, I come home and I'm immediately trying to recreate the feeling of being there. So I did come home and make some Moroccan tagine. We ate a lot of tagine while we were there, so I will be honest and admit that by the time we were done, my kids were like, "Okay, we're done. No more tagine."
Yeah. They were tagine out. Yeah, that happens. That happens. But
Yeah.
yeah. So for those who don't know, tagine is the sort of staple of Moroccan cuisine. It's very much akin to an Indian curry in the sense that it refers more to the type of dish than to the specific ingredients inside. It's a clay pot in which we cook the food, but then it also becomes the name of the plate itself. And the tagines, the sort of classic tagines, are going to be some kind of protein, so either chicken, beef, lamb. With some kind of vegetable. So some of the highlights or typical ones are like chicken with preserved lemons and olives, beef with potatoes, and then sometimes you have, for example, lamb with artichokes, green peas. Like the combinations are infinite, really. And then depending on which part of Morocco you're in, the way in which the tagine is prepared, the actual spices that are involved will vary as well. So it's certainly a world of cuisine to enter, the world of tagines, and we encourage our guests to do the experience of actually learning how to prepare a tagine at least once when they're in Morocco. That's
Absolutely.
a tagine cooking class.
I think what's so fun, well, you're about to show the Medina. I mean, you walk around, we haven't really gotten a sense yet of what it's like to walk around one of these cities. It is a feast for the senses, both from, a visual perspective and a smell perspective. Like it's just, there's food, there's spices, there's nuts, there's people. Like it's just really sensory overload. And I love every minute of it.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. This is another example of a fun activity we can put together. Really successful with families with teenagers. This one, which is a treasure hunt in the Medina, right? So the Medina is everything you just described, and so rather than sort of walking into and around the Medina with a guide, which is certainly something we put together, but the next version of that is to organize a treasure hunt where you're going from place to place. From the spice vendor to the guy who sells lamps to the gal who sells dresses, and then figuring out and uncovering clues along the way. Really, really a fun activity where we encourage, like I said, it's fun for adults as well, but the teenagers really get into it, and they get to use their phones for once. Like we encourage them to use their phones, to use different elements of technology to try to figure out the clues, and we can dial up the difficulty or the ease of the treasure hunt depending on the age of the participants. But it's really a fun way to discover Marrakech.
Absolutely. I love that. You know what else I love about it is when you walk into a shop, you look like you're walking through like a little door, or before a door opens, let's say, you have no idea what's behind that door. Like it could be something like this shop, or it could have, a series of rooms, one behind the other. It's sort of like magical when you open a door because you really don't know what to expect and what's behind it, whether it be someone's home or your riad, or a shop like this is just overwhelming. Yeah.
It really is, yeah, and the Medina is this is sort of a different point, but it's very much a place where it behooves you to have someone who's with you, ideally a guide to help you, orient yourself within the Medina, because it can be, even for us as Moroccans, like I use Google Maps in the Medina of Marrakech all the time, because without it I would be lost. So yeah, but yeah, every door holds a different mystery behind it, certainly. This is another element of Morocco that few people are familiar with, the Jewish heritage of this country. So Morocco has always had a strong Jewish presence in terms of its population, and there are certainly sites in Marrakech, in Fez, as well as in the city of Essaouira that are of importance to the Jewish community, and that's something that obviously, if relevant, we can organize visits and the experiences that tie into that Jewish heritage. So that's also a piece of Morocco that's quite important. Switching gears completely, one of the main monuments in Marrakech is the Majoret Gardens, very well known and curated selection of plants and cacti from all over the world. Now, Yves Saint Laurent, the fashion French designer, had his private home that was adjacent to the Majoret Gardens, and that's something that we can offer again as a VIP experience, to open up his home and have a guided visit of the house of Yves Saint Laurent, which contains priceless art dating back to different periods of art history, and then you can go into the Majoret Gardens from there and then do your visit of the gardens. The other element to combine with that is the Yves Saint Laurent Museum itself, which opened now, I want to say 5-6 years ago, and is very much worthwhile. It contains an amazing array of dresses and works from Yves Saint Laurent's massive collection, and they're all very well presented, so very much something worth doing as well as part of your time in Marrakech.
Mm-hmm. I'll contrast that before we skip out of Marrakech with a couple of photos. I think this is in Marrakech, but this gives you an idea as to how narrow the streets are. We kind of joked that, we Americans aren't always known for being the slimmest people in the world, but if you're going to get through this particular alleyway, it's just very, very narrow. I don't think this shows up on Google Maps, so I would echo what you say, and that is absolutely have a guide take you around the city. And I think the other thing that my kiddos loved having done was henna. All three of them ended up having it done, and it was a really fun experience, not only picking out the different designs, but talking with the women who were doing it and looking around the shop. They all absolutely loved that. So something else to put on your list.
Absolutely. And so moving away from Marrakech, we were talking about this earlier. I just wanted to sort of bring it to life. The Atlas Mountains, you can go as far as climbing Mount Toubkal, which is the highest summit in Morocco, and that's an overnight experience. But you can also just go for a casual day hike, just to explore the history and the scenes and sights and sounds of the Berber villages in these mountains that have a very different topography, but also a different culture altogether than the one you'll find in the urban centers of Marrakech, so and Fez and elsewhere. So very much worth doing. For the adventure seekers, we can organize some more adrenaline-driven activities such as paragliding in the Atlas Mountains as well. And then another element of Moroccan culture that is perhaps under explained and underexplored is the wine. Do you want to talk about your experience drinking Moroccan wine? How did you find it?
We drank more mint tea than we did wine. And actually, maybe clue me into this. So I think a lot of places in Morocco, you can't drink, can you?
No, you can. No, you can drink. Well, okay, now this is getting a little complex, but as far as foreign visitors to Morocco are concerned, you can absolutely drink any place that has a liquor license. And, when you're in Fez and Marrakech and most hotels have a liquor license, and yeah, you can absolutely drink. Morocco is known, well, domestically, certainly the wine is much appreciated. And in fact, the vast majority of wine produced in Morocco is consumed in Morocco, which is why Moroccan wine isn't really well known abroad. Very little of it is exported. But yeah, a lot of our guests are pleasantly surprised by the quality of the whites, the reds that are grown in Morocco, particularly in the regions either near Fez or Essaouira. So for people who are wine connoisseurs who are interested in the world of wine, we can organize wine tastings. And again, that's something that people don't typically associate with Morocco.
Okay. Yeah. So I would agree. I do not associate with Morocco, but I do associate mint tea, so much so we brought home a silver carafe and a bunch of little teacups. So again, we're trying to recreate, my husband actually purchased that. We're trying to recreate the feeling of being in Morocco, but from Hanover, New Hampshire. So we're not super successful, but we try.
No, that's great. So the whole time I lived in the States, I was drinking mint tea daily, and you can procure the tea online, like Amazon. You can buy it's a gunpowder green tea, and you get fresh mint leaves from your nearest grocer, and you combine the two, and that gives you Moroccan mint tea, and then you can add as much or as little sugar as you want to. Yeah, so I have just along with your teapot in Hanover, I have a teapot in New York with a friend of mine who lives in New York, and another teapot in California. So anywhere I go, I have to have a Moroccan teapot nearby just to make sure I can get my mint tea fix. So that's good. There's another option for a teapot in Hanover in case I'm ever in New Hampshire. I have to hit you up.
Yes, there is. And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there like a particular way that they pour it? Is that like a tradition where they lift it up really, really high and then bring it back down again?
Yeah, absolutely is. Yeah, and that's tied to a couple different things. So officially, we like you said, it's for the tea to cool down, right? Because for those few seconds that you pour it, it enables it to cool down a little. But and then to aerate the tea as well, to oxygenate the tea, that's important. But the real reason is showmanship. It just looks cool when you go as high up as you can, and you're not dropping a single drop of it outside of the cup. It takes practice, certainly, but yes, it always looks cool and impresses people when you go, super high to pour out the tea.
Agreed. Okay, so the argan oil is going to be very interesting because it's tied to, I think, the next slide you're going to show as well, and it kind of sounds complicated, but tell us about how these two things are intertwined.
Yes, the tree goats. Okay, so yeah, the slide I'm showing now, again for the podcast listeners, there's a unique phenomenon where the goats in the region of Essaouira go up into the argan tree because they love to eat the argan fruits, and so that's what we're looking at here, and it amazes people to see these goats standing precariously on very thin branches and somehow not falling, and so that the connection there is the argan tree, which again bears this fruit that we can then produce argan oil from, and for people who want to get into the weeds and learn a lot more about that, we highly encourage them to visit a cooperative, which has been instrumental. The financial model of the Argan Oil Cooperative has been instrumental to the emancipation of women in rural parts of the country, who are typically in single earner households. That single earner typically being a man. The Argan Oil Co-op model has enabled women to become primary breadwinners in their family units, and that in turn has driven an increase in the proportion of girls going to school because their women, their mothers want them to, and it's a lot harder for an aggrieved old man, of which there are way too many in this country and elsewhere, to refuse the education of his daughter than it is when the mom is a primary breadwinner in the home. So the Argan Oil Co-op story is about a lot more than just the argan oil. It really goes deeper into how it's transformed some of this family units in the rural parts of Morocco. So that's the argan oil. Essaouira is also well known for its souks, and particularly this kind of tuya wood. Tuya is spelled Thuya. It's a particular kind of tree that bears this wood that has a very unique smell, and the particularity of the smell of the crafts made from this wood is it stays with the objects for years and years. So I have a tuya wood box in my home that dates back now 30 years old, and it still smells the same way, this rich smell, scented smell of wood, which is quite pleasant to the senses, and that remains again. So that's one of the main exports of Essaouira, is all kinds of objects made from tuya wood. And I think that we're nearing the end of our experiences here, but we'd be remiss not to mention the Moroccan Hammam experience. Is that something you tried when you were in Morocco?
No, but I will next time.
Okay. Yeah, so the hammam is very much an integral part of Moroccans' well-being. Like our traditional weekly ritual involves going to the hammam, and so that's something that we invite our guests to discover all the steps involved in the hammam experience. It's typically about a 1.5 hour moment that will leave you clean and just feeling like a baby with brand new skin because of the exfoliation. So certainly something worth exploring. We're now getting into the weeds of some of the more random experiences we can organize, but in Essaouira, the city is right on the beach and has these beautiful windswept beaches that lend themselves perfectly well to either a horseback ride or an ATV ride, which we can also put together. Again, the list goes on and on. This was just meant to be a bit of a teaser or a peek into the world of Morocco, and hopefully we can welcome your guests and plan curated trips just for them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. So I also want to add in, I do believe we didn't do one, but everyone who's a regular listener or watcher to this knows I love via ferratas, that I think you have at least one via ferrata, if not multiple, in Morocco, correct?
I think so too. Yeah. And so that's certainly something we can include. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I like that for getting a little bit of adventure. And then when we were going from somewhere to, I think, Fez, Marrakech, correct me if I'm wrong, we stopped at Ifran, which is the little village that makes you feel like you're in Switzerland, but you're actually in Morocco. Tell us a little bit. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I'm not an Ifran architectural expert, so I don't know like how it came to pass that we have these like Swiss-like chalets in Ifran, but I can tell you that they've been around for a very long time. Like when my parents were growing up, Ifran was already well known for this architectural style. It's a city in the Middle Atlas Mountains that is the recipient of ample quantities of snowfall every year. What really put Ifran on the map domestically in Morocco is the university that is there now that attracts thousands of students students in Ifran every year. And yeah, as you said, it's on the way from Fez to the Sahara Desert. So it's a stop that we often do, and people get a peek at this Swiss-like little town in the middle of Morocco.
Right. And I think so that's something important to note is that when you are going, on a several hour drive from one place to another, there's usually fun stops to make. And it might be Ifran. It might be these monkeys that we saw, I think, actually outside of Ifran as well. So we stopped to see them. And then I wanted to ask you, because I don't remember where this is, but this is also a common occurrence, at least from what I understood. Our driver had asked one day where we wanted to stop for lunch. A tourist place or like a local place. And we said, well, what's the difference? And he said, the tourist places have nicer bathrooms. But either way, it's a very local experience. And so this was on my birthday, actually. We stopped for lunch. And I'm not exactly sure, for those people listening, this is a shot of multiple types of meat hanging from hooks. And it's sort of it was a barbecue place. And you essentially said, oh, I'll have some goat or I'll have some cow or I'll have something, and they just cut off a piece of it and throw it on the grill for you.
Yep, absolutely right. Yes, and you just have to know sort of the fortitude of your intestines before you venture down this path, because it's something that obviously if you're not used to eating exotic meats, it can upset your stomach. But if you have a solid stomach, then yeah, it's something to do for sure. You just buyer beware. We always want to make sure people are being safe. But I'm glad you enjoyed the experience, and it's certainly something that as a Moroccan we do quite often. But again, we just want to err on the side of safety for our guests.
Yeah. I like doing very local things. I had no issues. And I will say I learned that I loved goat when I was in Morocco. I never knew that.
Yeah.
Curious too, what about professional soccer? You guys have a good team, right?
Yeah, well, as a country, yeah, we had a strong showing at the last World Cup, and yeah, soccer is very much the #1 sport in Morocco, and we have a domestic league as well, like a professional soccer league. So if that's of interest, we can organize attendance at local games.
Okay, good, because I do like doing that. I know with my kids and other people do. A lot of Americans with kids have they're fans of an Italian league or a UK league or maybe a Moroccan league. So it's fun to, if it coincides with the season of when you're there, being able to go see like a real sporting event is always a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe let's transition to takeaway tips. One of them is the driving one that I mentioned earlier. What about for you as far as an ideal number of days? At the beginning, you mentioned sort of if you had 10 to 12 days, you can do that whole circuit. Would you say that's an ideal time to plan a trip to Morocco?
Yeah, in a dream world where you can take as much time off as you can, then yeah, like 10 to 12 nights on the ground gives you enough time to properly explore Morocco. This said, a lot of folks contact us and have 6 to 8 nights, and then we can obviously curate itineraries accordingly.
Okay, and especially if you add in a helicopter, that'll help you shorten some of the drive time. So that'll be a good way to do it. And then what about seasonality? Desert, people think of desert, crazy hot. Also, I know from experience, it can be cool. We were there last time in December. It's quite cold at night, so prepare for that. But what would you say about visiting in the summer, which is oftentimes, when a lot of people have vacation? What's it like?
Hot. So we typically recommend folks to avoid July and August. There are parts of Morocco that are perfectly pleasant during those months, such as Casablanca, places along the coast that have the calming temperate effect of the sea breeze. But when you're inland, which is where you're going to be in Fez, in the desert, and Marrakech, all three of those are inland, it gets very, very hot. So we're talking about like daily temperatures where the average high is going to be around between 100 and 110 degrees, and the average lows is going to be 70, 80 degrees. So I guess if you're from Arizona, it's just going to be like home. But unless you're really ready for those hot temperatures, it's best to avoid Morocco for those 2 months, July and August.
Okay. And so what would you say is your favorite time to be there? Is it dependent upon where someone goes, or?
No, the favorite time is going to be either the fall or the spring. So September through to November, fantastic time to visit Morocco, and then the spring as well is a great time to visit Morocco. If you are not bound by school holidays and things of that nature, the second half of January is a fantastic time to come because no one is here. Right, a lot of people come over the festive period, but they leave by January 5th or 6th. So second half of Jan is a very great time. You still have good weather and very few people in Morocco, so that's a great time to visit as well.
Okay. Yeah, I love shoulder seasons when you still have, good weather and a lot fewer crowds. That's always a
Yep.
nice combination. Okay. Well, Hicham, thank you so much. This has been delightful. I so appreciate you sharing your expertise with all of us. And I'm very much looking forward to sending clients back to Morocco again soon.
Thanks so much for having me. I hope everyone enjoyed our little tour across Morocco, virtually for now and hopefully in person soon.
Absolutely. All right. Take care.
Take care.